We interview a lot of cool people on this show, and yesterday we interviewed a guy that has done a lot of good for football. He's won a Super Bowl, coached one of the best defenses in the history of the NFL, and oh, by the way, he's a BYU alumnus. But for some reason, he's listed as 6 feet, 180 pounds, which might be the most Travis Schumachery thing that has ever been put on the BYU football database.
It's an amazing word.
Brian Billick in Studio B. Enjoy. Coach, it's great to have you. I believe you are listed on your BYU profile at 6 feet, 180 pounds. That was in 1974. That sounds about right.
Still true today, right?
Yeah. When I was in the 5th grade, maybe. Yeah, no. When I was here, I think, what did I top out at? I was, of course, 6'5". I think my maximum playing weight I was too skinny. I needed to get weight on. I was about 230, 235. Of course, we were throwing the ball all the time, so that's fine. I didn't need to block anybody, just catch balls down the field.
It's sort of, yeah, in a lot of the offenses nowadays, you could be flexed out and do that, but you got to put a hand in the ground nowadays, right?
Yeah, you know what? Well, that's the thing. It's all become so specialized. You know, it started with the Joe Gibbs where you had a point of attack guy and then you had the move guy. And now the tight end position has evolved such that you better be one of those guys to be able to inline and outside if you're going to be a top guy. And everybody needs one. Just like the advent of the safeties. You used to be, you don't take safeties and tight ends in the first round. Now, you better go get one if there's available because that's where the great ones come from.
You made the transition from the Air Force Academy over to BYU in the mid-'70s to play for LaVell Edwards and his crazy passing attack. What did he say to you to convince you that BYU was going to be the right place for you?
Well, I was a safety / outside linebacker. Really hadn't played tight end in high school. I was a quarterback offensively, and then I went to the academy and I played them in what they called their rover position. And then when I transferred to BYU, I don't know that they really thought what I would do. They were transitioning into this passing offense. I had the height and the size. Said, "Oh, you could be a good tight end." Sure, I'm in. And kind of figured that's where I'd be heading anyway. And I had a red shirt because I was transferring. So kind of was a little bit of everything. I played prep team tight end and outside linebacker and tackle and whatever. Yeah, Billick, get in there, because you're cannon fodder basically for the defense at that point. And got to really, without being a part of it, get to watch the evolution, how this was kind of getting pieced together. And then when I had my opportunity to actually step in, it had kind of solidified itself and the role for the tight end, and they were at the forefront of actually using tight ends in that capacity in the passing game, so it was kind of fun.
What was young Gary Scheide like? Because we still hang out with Gary, the gunslinging Joe Namath lookalike.
Gary was the dude, man. He was Joe Namath reincarnated. The slump shoulders and the way he carried himself, and that every time you'd watch Gary, and he'd get in and he'd look over and a run would come in, and he'd kind of like, "Are you kidding me?" He'd kind of be like that pitcher sitting on the mound going, "No,
take off the call.
Let's do something else." He loved to throw the ball. And loved, he was Joe Namath, and the shoes and the way he backpedaled, and the way he let go of the ball. Great player.
Number 12 as well.
Absolutely.
And he still got the slumped shoulders.
He still got the slumped shoulders.
That easy demeanor, and
He got the fishing shoulders too now, yeah. That 76 team, by the way, I was looking at the names on that, right? You're on that, of course, all WAC first team that year. Gifford Nielsen, Jeff Blank, Todd Christensen. That was
pretty good.
That was quite the team.
Yeah, and Todd Christensen wasn't even playing tight end. Todd was the tight end, or was the fullback.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I ended up with Todd in Dallas together. He was at the tail end of kept saying, "No, maybe you ought to be tight end." Goes, "No, I'm not." Yeah, no, I'm not. Okay, you're gone. And finally ends up in New York where they go, "You want to play tight end now?" "Oh, absolutely." But just a tremendous athlete. And obviously what he went on and did, particularly with the Oakland Raiders. But yeah, there was a lot of talent there. And it evolved around the fact that the total commitment, which it had to be because of what we were doing, to throwing the ball, you had some great, Jeff Blank, obviously in terms of what he was able to do both in and out of the backfield.
And so I didn't realize this. Todd Christensen doesn't play tight end at BYU because Brian Billick is tight end.
That's right.
I never realized this.
Day.
You roomed together, too.
Yeah, I told that story earlier where LaVell called me in, and I thought, "Oh, God, I've done something wrong." And he sits there, "Brian," he goes on and on about, "You've been great, and you're a team leader, and we really, okay, great. So what do you need?" "You're the only player on the team I can ask to do this. Can you room with Todd Christensen?"
Because have a thesaurus.
You are the only one that can handle the rev. That's what we used to call it.
The rev?
The rev, yeah. And I said, I'm up for it, man. Let's go. And we'd go back and forth, tooth and nail. And Todd was a good man.
Well, and you started the trend of great tight ends at BYU, right?
I think so.
Billick.
I think there was nothing came before. I'll take that that mantle. Sure.
Yeah, let's go through the list so we include everybody, right? Okay, so
No, let's
Brian
not go
Billick,
through
No. You'll leave somebody out.
Gordon Hudson,
I did not.
Clay
I'm not
Brown.
involved in this. I want to make this clear.
I got to get my names out there, right?
With the cast
Chris
of thousands.
We don't
Smith,
have all day.
Chad Lewis, Atula Mealy,
Brian's a
Doug
busy
Jolly.
dude. We don't
I
have
know.
time for this.
Hey, I just want to give people
Johnny
the
Hurley,
credit that they deserve.
Dennis,
Okay.
Well, not Dennis. You're right.
You caught two passes from two great BYU quarterbacks, Gifford Nielsen and Gary Scheide. What do you remember about playing football in the afternoon in Provo? Like, what was that like in the 70s and the crowds and the fanfare and all that?
You know, it was great because the thing I look back on, what was great is you had that sense that you were a part of something that was getting started. There wasn't a whole lot of success before that. I was on that first bowl team that obviously meant a lot to us, particularly with the style of what we were doing. And you got that sense that something's kind of going on here, you know, and the fact that we were on the forefront, and then I left, and obviously when they really got good, I don't know if there's an analogy there, but you got, you know, like we talked about earlier, LaVell made a bold move to say we've got to do something to compete differently than what we might normally do. And you could see the fruits of that. And all of a sudden it started to change. You could see the attitude change. And you could remember I came back and Jan got involved with the recruiting. And you could see there was a real sea change in the terms of the players we could recruit and the way players looked at BYU. When I first got here, in that initial recruiting class, there were actually more non-LDS than LDS athletes because BYU at the time really even then had a tough time getting the really great LDS athletes to come to Provo. And you could see that begin to change. And now, yeah, you could go into Ann Arbor and get a good young LDS player that might not go to Michigan or Michigan State. You could go into Columbus and beat Ohio State. You could beat that local team because they were willing to now because of what had gone on at BYU. And I look at that with a lot of pride, having been a part of that, the early years of that.
Yeah, it was a special time for sure, and you kind of see what happened from that. 1978, you're a grad assistant here, and that is an interesting year at quarterback where Mark Wilson and Jim McMahon split time. What was it like on the coaching staff as you tried to figure that out with that group?
Well, and it's a tough decision. Two different styles. Jim, actually, I coached Jim later on. We signed him with the Minnesota Vikings, which was a unique experience in and of itself, coaching Jim at that time. And I'm just on the periphery because I'm there as a GM working with the JV offensive line, and we're there primarily to service the offense. And you have some young players, including Steve Young, you know, who is just, you know, developing all of a sudden in terms of transitioning from an option quarterback and the things that he did. And obviously very different personalities. That's the biggest thing that jumped out at me. And again, I'm watching from kind of arm's length away because I wasn't, you know, necessarily involved with coaching the offense or defense on a varsity level other than prompting the scout team. And it was a battle because both had unique skills, different. Mark was so classic in what he did in terms of his ability to throw the ball, to process. Jim kind of just freelance things, but all of a sudden made things happen. The personality in the huddle, the way they dealt with the players off the field, you know, totally different. You could see the talent, and it's tough because, you know, the old adage, if you have two quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. That wasn't the case. These are two very good quarterbacks, and the balancing act that they had to perform in order to utilize both so that you didn't frustrate them or the team. Unique situation.
Brian Billick, Super Bowl champion coach of the Baltimore Ravens, with us in Studio B. And one thing that I always admired about LaVell Edwards specifically was the joy, the sincere joy he found in watching those that he coached and coached with succeed. And to see him just beam and light up when I'd bring up Mike Holmgren with the Packers or you with the Ravens. How did that relationship evolve over the years when you got into a high-profile situation and started to win some of these big games?
Well, and I've said many times, I don't know it wasn't until I became a head coach that I could truly appreciate the impact LaVell had on me as a player, as a man, as a father, as a leader, as a coach. Because it wasn't until I became a head coach and you have to make those decisions on a daily basis and do the things that you have to do as a head coach, that I would think back and going, oh yeah, now I get it. Now I see what LaVell was doing in terms of dealing with the personalities, both on the field and your coaching staff as well as your players, dealing with a myriad of things that you have to as a head coach. That's probably I always ask coaches who become first-time head coaches, what was the biggest surprise? And to a man, they typically will tell you, even though you prepare your entire life for the opportunity to become a head coach, you think you're prepared. And then you realize I had no clue of how many different things that have to be orchestrated and dealt with as a head coach until you become that head coach. And it was then that I realized and looked back and went, okay, now I see why LaVell did what he did, whether it be the dual quarterback situation, dealing with the personalities. You look at the coordinators, offensive coordinators that flow through here, there's some personalities there now.
Yes, there were.
And guys that, and I don't mean this in a bad way because I was the same way as an assistant coach, guys who very much want to platform their careers to get that chance to be a head coach. You have to deal with all that. You have to embrace that. And I learned from LaVell, like I did at Bill Walsh. I had 8 of my guys go on to become head coaches. And I realized that can be an asset. That if you prove yourself to be a place and a coach that will nurture that and help them do that, then you're going to get good people. Because good people will covet coming to that. And I think that's why LaVell, once people saw that, yeah, this can be that stepping stone for me. You talked about how as a coach you go and go, oh, look, maybe I have 4 or 5 years before they run me out of here. LaVell had to know as he brought these guys in, it would have been very easy to kind of downplay that. So, I'm going to kind of keep you under. I don't want you to become a head coach. I don't want to have to go find me another offensive coordinator after 2 or 3 years. I found that on the defensive side, as good as we were in Baltimore, that every one of my coordinators became head coaches because we were so good defensively that it became that platform. So you realize, okay, yeah, I got to have guys in the pipeline. I have to have a constant plan of succession so I know who that next guy is going to be that you knew LaVell had to develop here at BYU.
BYU's had some good pros over the years. Recently, BYU's trying to get some more into the league. What do you think it will take for BYU to get more draft picks, to get more guys like Daniel Sorensen, who maybe was undrafted but is sticking in the league, the Dennis Pittas of the world?
Well, at the end of the day, it basically comes down to talent. I mean, the talent pool that BYU is drawing from, they're able to tap into a certain number of players. The style of play that they play, again, sometimes lends itself to, I think you go back to, I think that if you want to look at the success of LaVell Edwards and the chain of quarterbacks that played for him, I think you can go back and look at a Steve Spurrier, you could look at Urban Meyer the same way. Not a lot of those guys have gone on and been successful in the NFL, which is not, I mean, that's fine. You're not here. That's not your job to develop NFL quarterbacks. Your job is to get productivity and develop college quarterbacks. It tells you that guys that at a certain talent level, you were able to platform their abilities at an elite, league-setting, record-setting level, that maybe at the end of the day, once they got into the NFL, you recognize that the talent level was only such, and that maybe it wasn't there to go beyond. So it makes you appreciate even more what they were able to do with that by wrapping a system around players that maybe at the end of the day, I'm not going to say they weren't good. I mean, you've got your Steve Youngs and obviously that have gone on and a Hall of Famer as a quarterback. But a lot of the quarterbacks from BYU weren't able to duplicate what they did in college in the NFL, and I think that speaks volumes to what they were able to do with them here. And again, the same thing could be said for Steve Spurrier and Urban Meyer.
I know BYU fans are anxiously wanting to draw from your well of knowledge, and that is, man, it's hard to not pay attention to the great defenses you coached and how BYU can implement that. Like if there were one thing that you would tell Kalani Sitake to help get his defense to that high level, what would it be?
Make them punt.
And get Ray Lewis.
I will tell you this. It is hard, whether it's in the NFL or in the college, but particularly in the NFL, you see a lot of the top-ranked offenses. Their defenses aren't ranked as high. It's hard to have a top-ranked defense when your offense is producing at that level. Why? Because teams have to catch up more. They're going to spread it out. You're going to give up a lot of yards, maybe even scores at the end of the game because they can't win the game. statistically, if that's how you choose to measure a defense, it's hard sometimes to duplicate that. That's what I alluded to earlier. When you're going to commit to a certain offensive style of play, that buy-in has to be on the defensive side as well, knowing that, okay, we probably aren't going to have the statistics defensively that you'd like to have to highlight for a defensive coordinator or to draw to. So that makes it harder to recruit to as well. So it's hard to be good at both. And if you're going to excel at one, that's the challenge for you. You have to understand and recognize this is the job. If we're going to commit to this style of play offensively, then we've got to recognize that there's certain vulnerabilities we're going to be put in defensively, and we can't get caught up with the defensive numbers that sometimes come with it, and recognize that this is part of the collective that we're going to have to buy into.
It's been great to have you with us. We have a tradition of all of our former BYU standouts signing our stretch Y flag. We would love your autograph on our stretch Y flag back there.
Can we see the ring? Is that the 2000?
Yes. They're gaudy.
Yeah, that's the most gaudy thing we've ever seen on this set, Brian.
It is. It's
by far.
I'll tell you a good Super Bowl ring story. We got this one in 2000. Steve Bisciotti, who was our minority owner and then became the head owner, the number one, the primary owner. He was saying, now we get another Super Bowl, we're going to downplay it. We're going to be classier. We're not going to go gaudy. I said, okay, that's cool. Well, and I ended up leaving. They go on. They win in a Super Bowl, whatever it was, in New Orleans. I come back and I see their Super Bowl ring. It's 3 times the size. I'm going, Steve, what happened? I thought you were. He goes, I couldn't help myself. So it's the way they're supposed to be.
That is great stuff. I want you to know, by the way, I got news of that Super Bowl championship for the Ravens when I was 3 weeks into the MTC, and I was depressed that I missed it. But, my mom snuck me the Sports Illustrated article.
What a rebel.
Fabulous.
Good stuff. Coach, thanks for the time.
Glad to do it.
Thanks, Brian.